A Marine returned home expecting warmth but found his 3 loyal dogs shivering in the freezing cold, chained to a porch. What happened inside that house? Why were they abandoned? The betrayal Daniel discovered behind that front door left him heartbroken, revealing a truth no soldier ever expects to face. Before we start, make sure to hit like, share, and subscribe. And really, I'm curious, where are you watching from? Drop your country name in the comments. I love seeing how far our stories travel. Sergeant Daniel gripped the steering wheel tightly as his car rolled down the quiet country road, his mind already racing ahead to the reunion he had dreamed of for months. The hum of the tires on asphalt echoed the pounding of his heart. Months of deployment overseas had built up this moment in his mind. A moment of reunion, of warmth, of home. He imagined the sound of paws scratching against the wooden floor. Every mile closer to home was filled with anticipation, a sense of relief that the battles were finally behind him. The quiet country road stretched out before him, dark and silent, mirroring the isolation he had felt while serving abroad. He thought about Max, his loyal German shepherd, Rocky, the sturdy Rottweiler, and Duke, the sharp-eyed Doberman. They were not just pets. They were his family, his anchor during the darkest nights of war. He had trusted his neighbor to watch over them while he served. Letters and calls home had been met with reassurances that his dogs were safe and loved. Daniel smiled at the thought, unaware that the warmth he imagined was about to turn into ice. The headlights swept across the front yard, and suddenly his breath caught in his throat. The porch light flickered weakly, casting shadows over 3 trembling figures. Instead of rushing forward with wagging tails, they stared at him with weak, pleading eyes. Daniel's excitement collapsed into confusion. Why were his dogs outside, exposed to the freezing air? Where was the warmth of home he had dreamed about for months? The sight chilled him deeper than any battlefield ever had. Something was terribly wrong. Daniel's boots crunched against the frosty leaves as he rushed toward the porch. The closer he came, the clearer the picture grew. Chains rattled against the wooden planks, binding his beloved dogs to the railing. His heart pounded as he knelt down beside Max, running his calloused hands through the German shepherd's trembling fur. The dogs whined softly, licking his hands as if begging him to understand. Their ribs showed through their coats, proof that they hadn't been fed properly in weeks. Daniel's throat tightened. He had trusted his neighbor to watch over them while he served. But here, staring into their desperate eyes, he realized betrayal had taken root in the very place he thought secure. Behind him, the house loomed in silence. The windows, once glowing with warmth, were now darkened, and the front door hung slightly ajar. Something about the quiet was suffocating, unnatural. Daniel unclipped the chains with trembling hands, whispering promises that they were safe now. The dogs pressed against him, tails wagging weakly, as though clinging to the hope that their suffering had finally ended. With his dogs huddled close, Daniel rose to his feet, his eyes narrowing at the faint light flickering inside the house. He pushed the door open, the rusty hinges creaking like a warning. Inside, the living room was in disarray, empty food cans scattered, furniture overturned, and a stench of neglect lingering in the air. His fists clenched as he called out his neighbor's name, the one he had trusted with everything he held dear. Silence answered back, heavier than any battlefront he had faced. Suddenly, footsteps echoed from the hallway. A figure emerged. His neighbor, disheveled, holding a bottle in one hand. Startled, the man stammered excuses, claiming the dogs were too much to handle, that he had done his best. Daniel's chest tightened with a mixture of fury and grief. He wanted to shout to unleash the rage building inside him, but the sight of his dog's thin bodies pulled his voice into a whisper. They depended on you. The neighbor shifted uncomfortably, avoiding his eyes. Daniel realized then that no excuse could heal the scars left behind. Betrayal didn't always come from strangers. It often wore the face of someone once trusted. That truth cut deeper than any wound he'd carried from war. Daniel's heart pounded as he moved past the trembling man and deeper into the house. Every step felt heavier, like the floorboards themselves carried the weight of betrayal. He opened the kitchen door, and what he saw made his stomach twist. Empty bowls sat crusted with dried scraps, long untouched. The water dish was bone dry, cracked at the edges. His dogs had been left without the most basic care. Their survival was not thanks to kindness. It was pure endurance, a fight to live each passing day, but it was when he opened the back room that the true horror revealed itself. There in a corner lay torn leashes chewed halfway through by desperate teeth. The dogs had fought, clawed, and pulled, trying to free themselves when the cold night set in. Scratches scarred the wooden doorframe, silent evidence of their suffering. Daniel's breath caught in his throat as he picked up one of the leashes. His hands trembled, his vision blurring with rage and sorrow. The truth settled over him like a storm. His dogs had been prisoners in their own home. And the neighbor, the man he had trusted most, had watched it all happen without lifting a hand to help. Daniel stormed back into the living room, his fists trembling as years of discipline battled with raw fury. The neighbor flinched under his gaze, stumbling backward until his shoulders hit the wall. "You left them to die." Daniel's voice cracked, not with weakness, but with a rage that shook the room. The dogs, sensing his anger, pressed closer to his legs, their trust anchoring him in the storm. He wanted to strike, to release the burning fire inside. But another voice echoed in his mind, his Marine training, the oath he swore to protect, not destroy. Instead of violence, Daniel took a deep breath and made his decision. He pulled out his phone and dialed animal control, then the local sheriff. The neighbor panicked, pleading, stammering excuses that fell flat in the suffocating silence. "It's too late for words," Daniel said coldly, his back straight, his presence commanding like the soldier he had always been. As sirens pierced the night, the neighbor's fate was sealed, but Daniel didn't watch him being taken away. Instead, he knelt beside his dogs, whispering promises he intended to keep. "You'll never suffer again. Not while I breathe." His tears fell freely, but they were tears of resolve. The officers arrived quickly, their lights flashing against the dark house. They documented the scene, taking photos of the chains and the empty bowls. The neighbor was handcuffed, his head hung low in shame. Daniel watched from the porch, his arms wrapped around Max and Rocky. Duke rested his head on Daniel's knee, exhausted but safe. The officers assured him that the man would face charges for animal cruelty and neglect. Daniel nodded, feeling a sense of justice he hadn't felt in years. It wasn't about revenge, it was about accountability. When the police cars finally drove away, the silence returned, but this time it was peaceful. Daniel carried his dogs inside one by one, placing them on the soft couches they had been denied for so long. He filled their bowls with fresh water and high-quality food, watching them eat with a hunger that broke his heart. He stayed awake all night, just watching them sleep, ensuring no harm came to them again. The night stretched on, but Daniel didn't feel tired. He felt alive. He felt like he was finally home. The betrayal was painful, but the reunion was healing. He knew the road ahead would be long, but he was ready to walk it with them. The bond they shared was stronger than any neglect could break. They had survived the cold, the hunger, and the loneliness. Now, they would thrive. Daniel stroked Max's ears, feeling the steady rhythm of his breathing. This was what he had fought for. This was what he had come home to. Not a house, but a family. The days that followed were filled with quiet determination. Daniel transformed his home into a place of warmth and safety once more. Fresh blankets lined the dogs' beds, bowls overflowed with food and clean water, and for the first time in weeks, the sound of contented paws echoed across the wooden floors. At night, instead of shivering on a cold porch, the three dogs curled against Daniel, their breathing steady, their trust slowly knitting back together. But the real healing wasn't just for them, it was for Daniel too. After years of carrying the weight of war and now betrayal, he realized his dogs had saved him as much as he saved them. Their resilience reminded him that broken things could be mended, that scars told stories of survival, not defeat. He often sat on the porch watching them play, his heart softening with every wagging tail. One evening, as the sun dipped low, Daniel whispered, "We're home now forever." His dogs rushed to his side, pressing into him with unspoken loyalty. Tears filled his eyes, not of pain this time, but of gratitude. He knew that no matter where life took him, he would never leave them behind again. They were his mission, his purpose, and his heart. The betrayal had tried to break them, but it only made them stronger. Daniel stood up, stretching his legs as the sunset painted the sky in hues of orange and pink. He looked down at his three companions, who looked back with eyes full of love. There were no words needed. They understood each other perfectly. In that moment, Daniel knew he was exactly where he belonged. The war was over, the battle was won, and home was finally safe.